Hi, I'm Renee Schaefer. This is about Take 6. I'm an English teacher in southwestern Kansas, and this is my presentation on Web 2.0, Reclaiming Education. After reading the literature, I first started by identifying a common problem, which is the fact that we have technology in our schools and we have Web 2.0 at our disposal, but there's still stagnancy in the teaching staff, the administration, and in the students when it comes to using it. There were a few causes that really resonated with me, primarily a lack of time. I began a transition to teaching program 2 years ago, so I began taking graduate level classes as well as teaching in the classroom. And I was also a newlywed at the time, so time was really a major constraint for me. A lack of administrative support. In my case, this was due to the fact that I taught at a private Catholic school, and so the administration's goals seemed to be more Christian based than education based at times. And we also had a lack of support as we did not have a technology support team. I like that the article addressed the digital divide. It basically touched on everything that I had witnessed at my school, um, unequal resources between my school and other schools, students with unequal access to resources, just a major gap in the way that tools could be accessed at home and at school. And there are definitely some solutions to the problem that I'll talk about a bit more in depth in the next slide. But primarily, one of the things that I saw that lined up with ISTE standards is that schools need to develop a shared vision, and they need to promote that plan and that vision and take the steps that are necessary to meet that goal. To resolve the digital divide, which I believe can definitely be done, we're going to need to devote a lot of time and effort, and ultimately we'll need to have somebody with a vision that's in charge of this goal. And that is something that my school currently is kind of struggling with, creating that vision and promoting it. Connections need to be made between home and school. Parents need to be as invested in the technological advances as the school is. There also should be a an opportunity for students who are perhaps under resourced to access things after school, like after school labs, devices for rent. Again, with ISTE standards 2C, I believe that there needs to be learning environments provided for students to access after school. And so maybe even if a student has all the tools at home but not a good environment, they can stay at school until 4:30 or 5 working on a project in an environment that promotes a technology use, and it's a positive learning environment. It's quiet, it's a safe place for them to be. And additionally, training for parents could also help to resolve the digital divide, because it can help parents to understand that their kids don't just have to use technology or the web for games or for something to keep them distracted for a while. We can train parents on how to be vigilant about what their students are doing online as well. There are a wealth of skills that are necessary for 21st century students that were also necessary for students in the 20th century. Um, they definitely need to be able to collaborate with a variety of personalities. I tell my students all the time, you're going to have to work with people that aren't like you and that you don't necessarily like. They need to also be able to communicate responsibly and professionally, and this is something I stress quite a bit too. It doesn't matter if it's text message or email or phone call. They need to be able to communicate clearly and effectively and responsibly. Um, be the ability to create or to problem solve, to use a variety of resources. All of these things are going to be crucial to developing a student that is prepared for either further education or ultimately the workplace too. One major one that I'd like to touch on here is an attention span. The internet or these quick information age resources have kind of created or contributed to very distracted students, and so the ability to kind of focus on one thing and work with that will be crucial as well. The global economy has definitely affected my personal internet use as well as my students' use. Due to a lack of funding at school, I've had to get creative with some of the free resources that I use, and I've put some of my favorite ones there. Quizlet is really great. Blogger, Dogo News, Kahoot, all of those tools are free and they're easy for students to access and use as well. Many of my students don't have home resources available because their parents can't afford it, or their internet's never working, or something to that effect. And as a result, I've learned to limit homework that requires technology and devote a little more class time to using some of those tools so that I can also help them troubleshoot some problems that they might encounter. Um, Due to an increased number of students with personal devices like smartphones, which is appalling to me, and tablets, I've also been able to increase my communication with students after school, and it's just made me more available to them for any problems they might encounter. And then social media is a huge one as well. I don't use much of it personally because I kind of like to stay off the grid. My students stalk me a little bit, but it does afford me the opportunity to do some creative, critical thinking exercises beyond the classroom. So I will use Twitter for language arts prompts, which is, it's pretty cool. The kids get into it. There's definitely a lot of training that I need. Specifically, one of the areas that I'd like to focus on is using apps or tools online that will help my special needs students, especially those that struggle with reading and writing. And I was able to find some cool applications for that this year, but I'd like to get a little more training on maybe implementing those tools. My school also needs to do a lot of training on the technology that they already have. I arrived in 2013 and we had iPads from 2010 that most of my teachers still did not know how to use. We have several smartboards and MimioPads that are not in use because people don't know how to use them. And on that same note, we have testing and data collection that is done online, and teachers are just expected to begin using it without any training. So the school has quite a bit to do, and as ISTE Standard 4B indicates, there needs to be more of a collaborative environment to do that testing and the collecting and the analyzing of that data. My school has more technology than would be expected for a very underfunded private school. We're equipped, but not necessarily adequately. 4th through 8th grades have a 1-to-1 Chromebook ratio, and 6th grade on up can take those home. But kindergarten through 3rd grade kind of got left in the dust and really don't have access to a constant tool. We do have a bit of an antiquated computer lab and teacher, and I know that might sound kind of harsh, but unfortunately the reality is that if you're going to be teaching technology or computers in the 21st century, you need to be willing to adapt and update teaching practices, and unfortunately our teacher is not willing to do that, which is just kind of a drawback for the students. We have 21st century resources like iPads and Chromebooks and MimioPads, etc., but there's not necessarily adequate training on that. I had a teacher this year that didn't know how to turn off her laptop. So it's a bit of a rough spot for my school. Additionally, a major problem that I see is that there's not a sustainable plan in place. Everything's kind of fly by the seat of our pants. There's not a vision in place, and there's not really a plan that's going to take us into the future with this. There are many advantages to using Web 2.0 in the classroom. I am a huge advocate of web-based learning and technological tools in the classroom. It's cost efficient for schools. We can individualize education for learners. There's plenty of opportunity for students to develop their skills for the workplace and learn how to use tools that they will someday need to use. It also creates a globalized learning opportunity for students to encounter people from all over the world and learn more about the world outside their little bubble. As we all know, students can be very egocentric, and that's just part of their developmental stages. And so using the internet kind of affords us the opportunity to expand that thinking. It can be used, I'd like to point out these 3 words here, to promote critical thinking and creativity when used correctly. The bottom line here is that technology and the internet afford our kids great opportunities, and it speaks their language. They're growing up in the information age, and it gets them excited, and they enjoy using it. So it's an invaluable tool. Unfortunately, there are many disadvantages as well. One that I especially encountered this year is plagiarism. I also struggled to get students to think outside the box beyond the immediate answers that they could find on Google. Um, One problem that every school will probably encounter at some point is a network issue. It seemed like every time I had a really great lesson planned using the internet, it was down. Um, I talk to my kids a lot about cyberbullying and treating each other with respect, not saying anything we wouldn't say to one another's face. Online predators are a huge issue. The kids just put so much information out there and don't think about who can see it and what kind of people are out there. Another one that we ran into is that lots of educational sites had blocked pages or were blocked because certain words were flagged, and that became a problem as some of my 8th grade students studied World War II literature and Nazis and Adolf Hitler. So ultimately, schools need to recognize that there are some issues or barriers in the place, and they need to acknowledge those risks and just kind of keep pushing forward, because 2.0 definitely has a place in the classroom. Unfortunately, I've been victim to a few student use fails, and I really haven't seen a lot of cyberbullying at my school. I will say that my school does a really good job of promoting a Christian atmosphere, and so there wasn't a lot of bullying on campus or online. There was a scenario this year where a student was using Google Hangouts with students from other public middle schools, and some of them were trying to tell a girl that she needed to commit suicide, but this student brought it to my attention, and we were able to kind of nip that situation in the bud. Excuse me, sorry. We also had some Snapchat fails. As a new young teacher, I became the target of some teacher videos that were taken at school or during class when, maybe when I had my back turned working with another student or something. I had a couple of students that had crushes, and it was just not a fun experience. I also had an encounter with a student masturbation video that I caught some students sharing and watching at school. Also a really uncomfortable situation for everyone involved, but that was addressed immediately, and they learned that I am savvy enough to figure out when they're Snapchatting. Ultimately, I think the biggest fail or problem is teacher-student friendships on social media. I don't think it's appropriate until after students have graduated. I personally like to keep my own stuff private because I want to have some semblance of my own life outside of school. But I also think that it creates just this ideal between students where they think, well, this teacher is my friend, and if a teacher adds them on social media, well, they're automatically the cool one, even when that teacher might be acting unprofessionally. So I just think that it's really a bad idea for teachers and students to be friends on social media, especially at like the middle school level and even high school, especially when those students start to develop hormonal feelings for other individuals, because sometimes that attention can be turned toward teachers, and it can be kind of a problem. Ultimately, I think that Web 2.0 has a place in the classroom, that it's absolutely vital. It's a great tool for students. It keeps them engaged. But I think that we have our work cut out for us in terms of training individuals on how to use the technology and allowing time for teachers at end services and other school planning days to develop and utilize those tools well. Thank you for watching my presentation.